So there was a piece of the show where we talked about the news from the SEC investigating Bobby Kotick and Activision Blizzard for how they're handling their harassment cases. And that most of that conversation, none of the audio was recorded for. But there was the tail end of that conversation was recorded, and that was Justin asking where does it go from here? Like, what could possibly be done to rectify these sort of cultures in the game industry? To which I answered unionization, and then he posited the question, what would unionization in the game industry even look like? And that's where this conversation comes from.
I'm going to say some stuff that might happen. I'm just adding 2 plus 2. So games would probably be less expansive.
Less expansive.
It takes so long to make a game as it is, a game like Red Dead Redemption or fucking Cyberpunk 2077.
Yes.
And it takes so many people that if you unionize, it would take way longer. They couldn't do crunch. There'd be all kinds of fucking rules about how long you can work them. And my brother is a executive producer for a production company, and I know quite well how fucking unionization works in the film industry for union things. It is a big fucking concern. You know what I mean? So you'd be very limited on how you could push your people and stuff like that. So it would take to make a game as expansive as as some of those games. It would take so long. You know what I mean? That it might actually be technologically unfeasible because the life cycle for consoles, you know what I mean? The technology changes faster than you need to make the games. Like if you were like, okay, we're gonna make a game for PS5, but it's gonna take us, like making a Pixar movie, it's gonna take us 4 years. We're gonna start now, it'll take us 4, but it takes 4 years now to make a game like that. So maybe it takes us 8 years.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Keep in mind that a lot of times, a lot of that game development time is ideation. There are periods of time, and I know this from say something. I mean, first of all, I worked on a Star Wars game that took 6 years to launch, as well as had some insight on Anthem when it was in its ideation stages. They say that game took like however many years, 5-6 years to develop, but I know that for at least the first 4 years, it was just a team of like 4 or 5 people on it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really like...
that would probably go away. You know what I mean?
Possibly, maybe, I don't know. But it depends on, it depends on what the agreed upon rules for, they might develop different development phases, like actual agreed upon definitions and terms for what a development phase looks like. And you may have a window where you can have like 4 or 5 guys or a small team that can do development work to a certain point, and then it's either like a shit or get off the pot situation where, okay, now you've reached this point where you either ramp up and this game goes to the next stage, the next agreed upon stage where certain hours are agreed upon, there's no crunch or whatever, blah, 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 or, you have to, move on to something else or whatever. There may be situations where so you could still create like a big expansive game, but it would have to follow a much more rigid development cycle.
Yeah, my question is in that rigidity, it would have to change so much the way that they do things now. It might take so long. Yeah, I mean, all the fucking hemming and hawing and back and forth and work and then people leaving and shit starting over and then getting scrapped and getting in and getting taken out. You can't make up that kind of indecision. You don't have the same luxury. You are limited, very limited by how you can work your people. Yeah. And it's like, we fucked up, so we got to get our guys in here now.
It all depends on how limited you are in being able to work your people. But I don't think that's. I'll just say some companies are better at it than others.
Sure.
And I think what you'll do is you'll probably end up weeding out some of the inefficiency.
Well, yeah.
For certain. Well, I don't think that kills your ability to create a big title.
I think what would possibly happen, and I don't really know, but I know that when something's unionized and it becomes rigidly unionized, it pulls in other things to be unionized. So game workers unite. So artists, everyone who works on games. But when they did that, see, they work by collective bargaining. They become a signatory to a union. That means the game studio, if it's a signatory, it can't hire like non-union voice talent. So now all of a sudden, its voice talent all has to be union because their other workers are union. You know what I mean? And so that union says, you're gonna, like, for instance, if you work.
Well, I mean, there are union film companies that still hire non-union. Oh, absolutely.
No. They have. There's all kinds of workarounds and stuff. But if
yeah, well, I mean, that's what I mean. There's always a workaround.
They're workarounds. But the idea is the unions try to weed that shit out. You know what I mean? There are non-union things. People do it in right to work states. There's getting around unions is a huge part of advertising production, film production.
I should mute my mic while I'm not saying
if you're
anything.
making a big movie, you know what I mean, where you've got big actors in your thing,
like
and
MCU movies.
Your DGA, your WGA, your fucking SAG, you're unionized.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's the thing. It's like your actors would all need to be union. There's a good possibility your score might have to be unionized. You know what I mean? Now you can get away from that a little bit by saying, "Oh, we license music and blah blah blah."
Yeah.
But a lot of games, because it's so interactive, you can't just license some shit and drop it in. It kind of has to be made for it. Well then, if your guys are unionized, now your music's all got to be unionized. And the Musicians Union of America and the game industry has been, doing this for years and years and years, kind of at each other. And they had an agreement for a while. I remember when I was at DGC that one year, that was a big thing. It was like, we can now get union musicians. Because back in the day, if you wanted an orchestra, you basically do your mock-ups and shit for a game. And then you're like, okay, we want to use a real orchestra. We have it in the budget. So you would actually have it done in like Czech Republic or Prague or something like that. Someplace where you could get non-union musicians who were good. 'Cause that's the problem. To get good musicians to play orchestral shit, they're going to be 9 times out of 10 they're going to be unionized in America. And so they would go to Prague. I mean, tons of, like, even movie trailers and shit. If you're trying to avoid paying a bunch of union musicians and paying royalties on the musicians and all that kind of shit, you're in Prague. And that's the thing. It would be a domino effect.
Well, but
I think one of the things that might end up happening is that something like The Witcher 3 or The Witcher 4, whatever it is, would be done in episodes. You know what I mean? And it would come out over a longer period of time. So you could basically have everybody on it. We're working on this. You know what I mean? And you would deliver this kind of scope, but because it takes so long, you narrow the narrative scope and say this is an episode, and then you release that, and then you begin to do on the next one. Almost like the way they did the expansion packs. You know what I mean? Because it doesn't. You're biting off a lot less.
Music is just so loud.
Music and dialogue and art and all the shit that and then coding, and you could plan them less. So we'd almost become like showrunners for doing a game would be like doing The Mandalorian for a season. You know what I mean? Like you're looking at all the things, you're looking at all the episodes, and I'm like, okay, we can spend this amount of money on this episode. We can have it done by this time. You know what I mean?
I don't think it would be as rigid as that because, I mean, there are a couple of things. Like, for starters, like the tools around game development is all but standardized at this point. There are really only a handful of engines that most companies use, and the support for them is next level, and that makes developing games a lot easier. Like you can crank out a game that is ostensibly of AAA quality with half the team size in half the time. If
but Cyberpunk. That was on their own proprietary engine.
Yeah, that's why.
Well, my point is that how many studios still use it? Doesn't Rockstar use its own engine?
I have no idea.
I know Anthem has its own engine.
EA was trying to make Frostbite like a competitor to Unreal.
There's Crysis. People still use that.
Do they? I think only the people that make Far Cry use that.
They're using it.
I mean,
those are big games. Those AAA titles. My point is
but I mean, you're talking about like. Okay, you have your big titles that use those, but then, like, God knows there's like a giant sea of titles that all use Unreal.
Yeah,
they all use
Unity. I don't know why you use anything else. Like, if I was developing a AAA title, I would use Unreal.
Well, and I think that's what would happen. I think like What would happen, honestly, is that like companies that struggle with their engines, like CD Projekt Red and EA, would probably say under like these hypothetical union rules, like we don't have the wiggle room really to. Well, I mean EA does. Well, you know what? They both might have the wiggle room to fuck around with their own engine.
Oh, I think they would try.
They would probably try.
I think they would try and fail at least once before they were like, okay.
But they might make the fiscally prudent decision to just go with what works best. You know, because that gives them more time, more leeway, more development tools, or more development resources towards actually being able to hit their schedules. Why don't they do that now? Because they don't need to. They can work their workers to the fucking bone, dude. they can crack that whip.
I guess that's the thing. I guess that's really, and that is the crux of the point. You're right. The shortcomings of trying to fucking build out the CD Projekt Red engine. There are a lot of issues with the engine they were trying to build out.
Dude, let me just tell you. Never mind CD Projekt Red. When I was working at BioWare Star Wars: The Old Republic, we were using the Hero engine. I don't know why. I guess at some point they demoed it to the BioWare Pandemic guys back when it was BioWare Pandemic, and managed to convince them that it was a great engine to build MMO on. It wasn't. So if you want to look through, like, I think for a long time, SWTOR was like the most expensive video game ever made.
Yeah.
We poured a shit ton of money into it. The reason why is because that engine was not suitable for building an MMO. It didn't have any of the tools that we needed to actually be able to build a huge, robust MMO world. So we spent a shit ton of time building those tools ourselves, and then subsequently QAing those tools, and then whenever bugs would pop up in those tools that would affect development in some fucked up capacity or another, we'd have to go through, fix those bugs within the tools, test those tools and all that. The turnaround cycle on that, just focus on those tools alone, would affect the development cycle on features that relied on those tools to work, or that relied on a new feature that doesn't exist but they needed to in order to do the quest the way they want to do and whatnot. And that shit isn't quick or cheap or easy either, because a lot of the times you have to spec out what you need in order to actually accomplish building out those features, and then you figure out while they're developing it that they actually can't do it this way, they have to do it this way, and if we do it this way, then we have to actually refactor this entire whole system that we weren't even really thinking about. But now that we're refactoring this whole system, there's all this other shit that just comes falling out of the woodworks when you're just trying to do something that the engine wasn't meant to do. So, like,
and I think for our listeners, though, we would say, like, okay, their motivation for doing that, rather than just using Unity or Unreal off the shelf,
well, they already
is that they don't have to pay. I mean, like in your case, but if it's a proprietary engine, whether it's Frostbite or whether it's the CD Projekt Red ones or Crisis engine, whatever, Crytek, they don't have to pay them. They make more money. But the thing is they make more money, and they've got workers they're already hired. They can just work to the fucking bone to fill in the gaps. You know what I mean? The shortcomings of their own engines.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So they're like, right now,
because a lot of the times you're just pulling resources from where you can pull them from within your studio, whether that's what they were hired to do or not. Like a lot of people who were like hired to be, say, quest engineers or whatever, they'll be like, oh, okay, well, we need to do XYZ in order to get our combat system working, so now you're doing pathfinding. And it's like, well, I mean, I don't...
Imagine if you got hired to be to work on quests, and you have to do some other random shit. You're like,
I mean, a part of the reason why, and it's kind of funny, because like I hate MMOs, so it was funny that I got hired, to work on an MMO. But my dispassion for the genre gave me the... I'm going to leave my mic unmuted because I don't know if I unmuted my mic when I went on my explanation there. In case I didn't mute my mic or unmute my mic, I'll go over it again real quick. What I was talking about when I mentioned speccing out is that, sometimes when you're trying to plot out, how to develop a feature that you don't have that you need for something or other, speaking very vaguely here, you may come to the determination that you need some third-party tool. And there is a development cost to integrating a third-party tool for certain, but then there's also a monetary cost too. And a lot of companies don't have the pockets to toss that monetary cost around. Now at EA, especially when they were trying to crack a whip to get this game out, they did have the pockets deep enough to throw money at whatever problem we encountered. So that wasn't really an issue there. But for a lot of smaller developers, they don't have the freedom to just open up their wallet whenever they encounter a problem. So if they're working with an engine that can't do what they need it to do, and they need to build some feature for it, then, if the option to integrate something that does what they need it to do, isn't an option, isn't available, then, you're sunk. You're going to be building out, you're going to be recreating the wheel, because you can't afford to buy a wheel that's already there and works just fine. Good luck rebuilding that wheel. And the cost of that, both as far as development cycles, development time, and the monetary cost of it too. So I mean, there's a variety of reasons why going with an established engine is just should be common sense. But I think for larger studios like EA, when they were trying to lean into Frostbite, I think that they wanted to not give any of their money to Epic or whoever does Unity. I forget if that their actual company is just called Unity. They don't want to give them their money, but then also maybe in the future turn around and leverage Frostbite in the same way that Epic leverages Unreal, and then Unreal has an actual competitor. Like Unity doesn't compete on the same level. It can't do quite the same things that the Unreal Engine can, but if the Frostbite engine was stabilized and continued to be iterated on, maybe Frostbite could compete with Unreal and with Crytek. So, yeah, I mean, there's a reason why the big studios want to do that. But again, if game industry unionization puts the clamps on your ability to crack a whip on your workers the way that you would need to in order to build out a robust and stable game engine, then in a timely manner, that is. Because you could build one out if you have 10 years to spare, but if you need it in at least 2 or 3, there's going to be some whip cracking going on, and if the game industry unionization doesn't allow for that, then basically what exists now is going to become even more the standard than it already is. So Unity, Crytek, Unreal, and maybe Frostbite, maybe. Like, the door pretty much closes on that. And any company that tries to build their own proprietary engine, I don't know how they do that, unless they start off with like a baby engine and their own little baby version of Unity, making really small footprint games, and then just reiterates on that over the course of a decade or so until it's something more robust. Like, it would have to, like releasing games and having their normal cycle ongoing. Like, it would have to be something like that, I imagine. Ability to basically work on any level of the game development that needed the attention. Yeah. So I was always being shifted to things. I worked on pathfinding, I worked on combat, I worked on quest, I worked on the fucking patcher, like actually downloading the game to your fucking hard drive. Like, they put me anywhere and everywhere that they needed the resources.
They needed to shake out the suck.
Yeah.
We gotta shake out the suck. Get Devin in there.
And that's what you do. Like, when you have like a massive company like that, sometimes the best thing to do is just to shift your resources wherever you need it. And if you're working on a shitty engine, you're going to be shifting a lot of resources towards making your engine unshitty, and
I want to say, I think Unreal's got it figured out.
Yeah, they
fucking Unreal 5 shit is off the chain.
I don't understand why
game studios
want to build their own
don't
game
fuck
engine.
around. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't understand.
If you want to go to the mall, you don't build a car to go to the mall. You get in the car and go to the fucking mall.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like, my dad came up with that.
But it's true though. Like, Unreal, they spent decades refining that engine, and
it is refined.
And it is unbelievably
I mean, I see
refined,
shit on it. Like, I saw on YouTube right now. I saw a video earlier today someone posted, and they had done a bunch of photo scans of some fucking old castle in Prague, and they had put it in Unreal, and it had a little bit of jitters and moved around, but dude, it seemed like it was real.
Yeah.
Like, it seemed like it was a completely real environment that they were videotaping, like a fucking camcorder. You know what I mean? And I was like, they've won. It's over. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, they've figured it out.
They really have. And, you know, I think Crytek, I think those are the guys that make Far Cry. They know how to work their game engine.
Yeah.
And that's great. Maybe it's proprietary knowledge. Maybe if you gave Crytek to some other company, they wouldn't be able to work it quite the same way. It might be a learning curve and a bit of a hassle. I don't know. But so long as Crytek understands their technology and they can make a solid, stable product out of it, then fine. They can use Crytek. And, you know, EA, they're plugging away on Frostbite, and I think they might be ready to give up on it.
I hope so.
But whatever the case may be,
Frostbite damn near killed Anthem. I mean, like,
if you can't,
a lot of its issues were supposedly based on having to do with Frostbite.
If you can't get your engine to do what you need it to do, like, you got to be able to fucking cut bait on that thing. And if game
that's the lesson we learned in our very first
yeah, exactly
doomed game venture.
Oh boy. Well, we could talk about that later. But yeah, so like for that reason, I think that that, you know, what the concerns that you have about the game industry unionization, I think they're legit. I think it would Oh, see, I forgot. You know what? I'm just gonna stop using the mute button. It's clearly more of a problem than a solution. But yeah, Mass Effect 5 may ditch Frostbite engine to avoid Andromeda repeat. While we still know nothing about the next Mass Effect game, only that it will not be going back to the Andromeda Galaxy. Something interesting may be going on with this development. A job listing has been spotted looking for a technical director role for Mass Effect 5 with, quote, experience with Unreal Engine. On its own, that might be ignorable, but industry insider Jeff Grubb from GamesBeat has confirmed that his own sources tell him that BioWare is considering all options when it comes to the game, and that may include ditching EA's often mandated Frostbite engine for the more flexible and widely used Unreal Engine from Epic. Yeah, it's not a surprise, but kind of a surprise. Shake out a lot of the.
I think they should do it. I'm all for it. I think it definitely needs to be unionized. I'm just saying, like, what would it look like? Because it's like when people complain about, like, you know, like, man, I think we just gotta move out of China. We can't be having anything made in China ever again. Fuck China. We just make everything here like we did in the '60s. It's like, okay. Yeah, all the time people say that shit. You know what I mean? Okay. And they say it in that exact accent. It sounds exactly like that. But you're like, okay, well,
huge swaths of our supply chain is dependent on China.
Yeah, and like the shit that you buy right now that you're used to paying like $12 for was now going to be $52. You know what I mean?
Maybe not that extreme, but it would be a big markup.
Yeah,
it
dude.
It would be a big markup.
Because the thing is the companies aren't gonna like absorb the loss. They're like, oh,
yeah.
Now instead of having to pay 50 cents an hour, we've got to pay $15 an hour. I guess we're just not gonna make as many millions as we made last year.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's not gonna happen. You know, they're gonna be like, oh, that shirt that you bought at Walmart for $7.95, that's a $40 shirt now.
You see it in that situation. That's where having a union would come in really handy, because then you'd have to argue for wages, and that would balance itself out. Things would be more expensive, but people would be paid more.
Yeah.
And eventually, it would become sustainable, but it would be rough to get there. If we cut China out entirely, like, it would probably be 15, 20 years of really, really hard times.
Oh, it'd be rough, dude.